I loved conferences. Conferences were my absolute best times in my teenage years. Conferences, which are often known simply as cons, are weekend gatherings of Unitarian Universalist teenagers from all over the district. Perhaps you have heard the teens in this congregation speak about cons, or maybe your teens have been to them. Conferences can be a great way for UU teens to explore their religious journey with other UUs. The experience growing up as a Unitarian Universalist is very different from those who find this religion later in life. Born and raised UUs have different needs on their religious journey. To continue, I loved conferences. At one of my first cons, we settled in for our late night worship circle. We lit the chalice, shared opening words, and then prepared to sing a hymn. My friend, I'll call her Sam, said, "If you're uncomfortable singing God, you could change it to earth or peace or love." Changing the words in the hymns was not something that I had considered before. I liked singing the hymns well enough, but I did not think much about the words. They were just words that didn't mean too much to me. Who has time to think about the words and what they mean when you're singing? When we got to the word God in the hymn, I changed it to earth along with some of my friends. Later, I realized that the lyrics didn't really make a whole lot of sense with peace or earth. Perhaps changing the words didn't really matter to me. But that night, I learned that the words mattered a lot to some of my fellow UU teens. This was one of the first times that I remember becoming aware that I had a theology, and that one's theology can be chosen and adapted. What theology, what beliefs did I have? Or would I have? For those who were here last week, I mentioned learning about God when I was a kid. I learned about my neighbor's God, the big man in the sky, and about my mother's God, the idea of God. But at that younger age, I was not aware that I could develop my own ideas about God. In my Sunday school, we explored why bad things happen, how to treat others with respect and kindness. We visited neighboring congregations and religious communities. We read and talked about some of the Bible stories, and we learned some of our Unitarian and Universalist heritages. But I don't remember learning about God. When I say I don't remember learning about God, I don't mean reading the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic stories about God. I'm speaking about the use of the word God to point to that which connects all, or the ground of being, or the spirit of life. That ineffable mystery that some or many feel moving through moving through all life. Unitarian Universalist congregations encompass and welcome a diversity of religious identities, ideas, stories, and metaphors. Though some congregations may lean a little further into particular theologies. The congregation I was raised in was more of a humanist and atheist-leaning church. I have wondered if being raised in an atheist-leaning congregation led to religious education programs that, while addressing ethical and moral issues and the choices we make in our lives, left me without the capacity to engage in conversations with my non-UU friends and neighbors. Instead of being equipped to talk about God with my neighbor's mother, my mother, or my fellow UUs, I was invited to replace God with earth. During my teenage years, I experimented with God. Sometimes I sang about God. Sometimes I sang about earth. Other times I wondered about the idea of God. I was not particularly interested in the God in the sky story. Ultimately, I came to believe that there was no God. I was an atheist. This life stance was welcomed by my mother, my church, and my UU friends. Though I didn't think much about the lyrics of our hymns, I began to regularly change God to universe. Only about 12% of born and raised UUs remain involved or return to our UU congregations. The other 80+% find Unitarian Universalism later in life. Of these, some folks were never too involved in a religious community. Others wanted to find a religious community because their children began to ask religious questions. Some come to find community and friends. Others left former religions because their theologies shifted as they grew and integrated new ideas into their life stance. And then there are others who may have been harmed by past religious experiences and came looking for a place to feel safe. Those who were harmed by past religious experiences may have been told that they would be punished for being who they are or who they love. They may have experienced physical abuse by religious leaders or others in the community, or the theologies taught were abusive, harmful, or lies. It is those folks who rejected earlier theologies and those who were harmed by past religious experiences who most often choose to change the words to hymns or encourage others to change the words. For some, religious words can be discomforting because they don't fit in one's theologies. But for those who have been harmed by religious leaders or abusive theologies, it can be unbearable to hear or sing those words again. That earlier hymn, that earlier harm can feel that it is happening again in the moment. The most challenging aspect of healing trauma is choosing to heal. For some, healing may happen in a therapeutic environment using a trauma-informed model like internal family systems, somatic therapy, or EMDR. For others, worshiping in a kind, loving religious community with supportive and affirming religious stories and rituals can help to heal past religious harm. Others may turn to a spiritual director for exploration and guidance. Unitarian Universalism can be a very welcoming religious community for those coming out of other religious traditions or coming into a religious community for the first time. Here, you are invited to deepen your religious faith. In our congregations, you meet others who are exploring their religious journey. You may talk and learn and discern with each other. However, there are many who, upon arriving in our congregations, feel free from past difficult religious communities and may decide that this is the end of the journey. But it isn't. We are always on a religious journey, especially in a UU congregation. I offer you this example. Many years ago, when I was a staff person in a large UU congregation, one of my responsibilities was to schedule people to bring food for social hour. At first, I put notes in the newsletter that all members and friends whose last name started with a certain alphabet letter were encouraged to bring snacks. I found that this did not work very well, so I began emailing members and friends directly. This did two things. It brought in more food for social hour, and it clarified the members and active friends of the congregation. The office administrator and I received several responses from folks who had left the congregation and would no longer bring snacks on Sunday. Once I received an email from a woman who had left the congregation. She thanked me for reaching out, and she thanked the congregation for her years with us. While she was a member of the congregation, she felt welcomed and safe enough to explore her religious faith. The UU congregation allowed her to reflect back over her religious journey. She had been raised Catholic, but had left the church. She felt that she no longer agreed with its teachings, and after she experienced some abuse in the church of her childhood, she left. During her time with the UUs, she was able to look back on those earlier years. She chose to move through the grief that she carried and to address the trauma that she had experienced. She explored different theologies, and after a time, she began to find aspects of her Catholic upbringing that still resonated with her. By the time I reached out to her, she had returned to Catholicism. She was grateful to the UUs for providing space for reflection and healing, and grateful to have found her way back to the Catholic Church. She befriended her religious past and welcomed it as part of her religious journey. Unitarian Universalism encourages people to explore their religious values and beliefs regularly. As we learn, discover, and discern our values in our lives, our beliefs change to reflect these new ideas. As I mentioned earlier, I became atheist in my late teens. I identified as an atheist into my first year of seminary. In seminary, I met people with an incredible diversity of religious beliefs and practices. I learned that very few of my fellow students believed in an old man in the sky. Most spoke about their relationship with God, their relationship with life, their relationship with the religious stories, rituals, and traditions that they leaned into and practiced. It was rare to meet a seminarian who spoke about their religious journey as belief or disbelief. Instead, we spoke about relationship, and we spoke about love, justice, and equity that God called us to embody in the world. We spoke about how God's love worked through our bodies, through our hands, and through our hearts to bring more loving kindness and justice into the world. When I first heard my fellow students speak about their relationship with God, I was honestly befuddled. I just could not get my mind around what they were talking about, but I was willing to sit in my discomfort. I held on to my atheism until I had some firsthand spiritual experiences that led me to understand that there was more going on in the universe and in life than I could ever fully understand. And I know that I am in a relationship with whatever that is. I am in relationship with life, including earth, water, rocks, minerals, and everything that is. When I need to define my theology simply and explicitly, I call myself a panentheist. Panentheism roughly means everything in God, but it is more than that. In his book, The Heart of Christianity, the theologian Marcus Borg offers, rather than a person like God being out there and separate from the universe, God is the encompassing spirit in whom everything that is. The universe is not separate from God, but in God. Later, he continues, panentheism sees the presence of God in, with, and under everything, as a presence beneath and within our everyday lives. This understanding of God is an expansive, inclusive, and relational understanding. It is what works best to describe my theology these days. However, given my religious journey so far and my commitment to religious exploration, I expect that my theologies will continue to evolve through the rest of my life. Unitarian Universalism invites everyone who finds it to explore and befriend their lifelong religious journey. I hope that you will befriend your journeys, and I hope that you will befriend each other's journeys. May it be so.